So I just want to welcome everybody to our fireside chat. You can see our little virtual fire back there in how to make a business case for HR technology. And I'm delighted to have my partner, Morris Yankell, who is the founder of HRComputes, join us today. And he will be sharing his thoughts and ideas. We'll have some guests, special guests also participating throughout the day. So just going to start by just sharing a little bit about the Rosen Group, and then I'll turn it over to Morris to do the same with his company. We are celebrating about 25 years in business, and we focus on placing HR professionals at pretty much all levels, and we're kind of industry agnostic as well. Half our business is contract, half is direct hire. We're also offering coaching services for HR leaders. And last but not least, we have a partnership with HRComputes to provide HR technology consulting services. So that's our business model. And I'm going to turn it over to Morris, who's got a company called HRComputes, and I will let you share a little bit about your company.
Thank you, Scott. Pleasure to be here today, and I thank everybody for attending. It's a mutual invitation group that we have today, so I'm hoping that people join in and don't be shy, ask questions, comments. But HRComputes, we've been in business about 30 years. We're small but mighty, and it's all about human resources technology. Optimize what you have, select the right next vendor, and implement with speed to impact and getting your money's worth. Thanks, Scott.
Terrific. So we're excited to have a partnership together, and we launched pretty recently. So we're really getting out there into the HR community, and we welcome your input, ideas, and support. So just briefly, most of you know the drill with Zoom. We're going to mute you during the presentation. If you do want to participate, you can either raise your hand or you can put a note in the chat box with a question, and then we'll unmute you and we'll go from there. Pretty simple. So today we're going to start off talking about the state of HR technology. Then we're going to talk about the opportunities that exist to upgrade, right size, or replace technology. We'll look at some of the challenges that HR leaders are facing with technology these days in HR, and also the next topic would be how to make a business case to your leadership team, senior management, IT, finance. How do you go about doing that? And then we'll have some examples, and then we'll talk about how to actually get started with an implementation. Again, this is a lot to cover in an hour, but we'll do our very best to try and cover as much of this as we can. Great. So we are going to start off by talking about the current state of HR technology. And I'm going to ask you, Morris, to maybe sort of tell us what's happening in the space right now. Maybe you could share a little bit about what the pandemic is doing to HR technology, and kind of maybe just give us a broad overview right now of what's happening. I imagine there's not much going on right now in technology.
Good one, Scott. That was great.
So go ahead.
$16 billion industry in 2019. So it's even more money than the CEO of Google made last year. Hard to believe, but projected to be 38 billion by 2027. It's huge. It's growing. There are more vendors out there than people can keep track of. There are new vendors every day. There are private equity money all over the place. I had somebody asking me about this vendor or that vendor, and who should they seriously consider in a global implementation. And one of the things was, well, maybe that vendor is, they're not well capitalized, or we're not sure if they're going to be around in 20 years or something like that. And my answer to them was, well, I don't know. They're a payroll company that's been around for 20 years already, and they've got clients who have not gone away. So the difference between a company like that and a company that has, first level or second level of funding big difference. But the words like Workday and SAP Success Factors and Ultimate Software, Kronos, Ceridian, ADP, IBM, iSIMS, Taleo, Bamboo, MOU, SE, those are now words in our lexicon, right? We know what those are, we've heard of them and more, all about that language of human resources and human resources technology. The funny thing here is that that technology is supposed to help us transform HR, and it can if it's done right and it's done, carefully, successfully. It can help you retain human capital. It can help you align organizational strategy with individual goals, and it can help manage human resources in a way that really helps organizational growth. So that's kind of the state of technology today. Your second question about the pandemic, it's a great question. Pandemic is obviously on everybody's mind as hopefully more and more people are getting vaccinated. But the point of COVID has been, and you read this everywhere, it's sped up the digitization transformation. What does that mean? I think this is a perfect example of what that means. Here we are, not in person, shaking hands and kissing babies, but we're here doing networking, doing business in an electronic, digitized format. Your employees are now that much more used to doing business this way. So when you start to think about how do we communicate with our employees? How do our employees communicate with us? How do we do management conversations? How do we do employee relations? How do we do performance appraisal? How do we do all of the things that are part of the human resources employee journey? The digitization process, the technology is now embedded more and more in what people really believe. So the story that I tell is when conversations with a human resources person about their new technology, and they have employee self-service and manager self-service. Maybe you're interested in rolling those kinds of things out. And I've heard some HR professionals say, well, we're ready for it here in HR, but our managers and employees, they're just not that technical and they're not ready. And then you go talk to the managers, and the managers say, we can handle it. We're ready. But our employees are just not that technical and they're not ready for it. And then you talk to the employee and they go, is it on my phone yet? And that's the bottom line. People are that much more used to using technology because of COVID. And that's why HR technology is poised now to really make an impact.
Terrific. So again, I just want to encourage people, if they have either questions or comments about what they're seeing in HR technology, we welcome them. You can, again, raise your virtual hand, or you can put a question in the chat. Just on the state of HR technology, Mars, a little bit more around, do you think HR is prepared for the onslaught of all the different technology options that are coming their way? And what do you think are some of the missing gaps that might be existing with HR to kind of, it's overwhelming, I think. If you go online and you look at HR technology, like you said, you just listed, 50 different, vendors. How does HR even tackle that? How do they educate themselves?
So, that's where, quite honestly, two things. One is that's where people like us come into play. That's where situations like this come into play. Understanding what's out there, talking to someone who's in the industry, that's certainly a way to fill yourself in. But the other way is, quite honestly, there are times when you can do a demonstration of a product and you be honest with the salespeople. Maybe you're not in the business of buying today, but you're looking at what's out there. So HR folks, they're reading the journals, they're seeing what's happening in the industry. They hear a name, someone like HireTool or Phenom People, one of these sort of leading edge kind of organizations that doing some really cool things. You hear about that. Well, go on their website, take a quick look, or get on there and make a setup with somebody to have a conversation. Seeing what's out there is a great way to just sort of peek in your brain. What are the possibilities? And then certainly to have a strategic conversation about where you're headed, where you are today and where you're headed tomorrow. I think those are intelligent things to do and ways to prepare for the future. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that towards the end. Yeah.
Okay, good. So thank you for giving sort of a broad overview of what the state of HR is in terms of technology. I'd like to switch over to kind of what the opportunities are. What are the what do you find is the biggest gaps? You talked a little bit about that, but when you're evaluating HR technology, where do you start? You're a director of HR, or a VP or a CHRO, and you're thinking, okay, we need to look at our technology. We have some antiquated, or we have some pieces. Where do you start here? How do you look for opportunities? What areas do you look at first? Do you look at the whole enterprise? Are you trying to connect to accounting and finance, or are you not dealing with that first? Are you going to take it one piece at a time and just deal with talent acquisition and then move to some other area? Like, how do you start? And how does that vary by size of company? Does it
So
matter if you're a smaller company, a medium, a large company? Yeah.
it's a
So what
great
do you think?
question. It's a great question. And so we do have a question in the chat, Scott. Not that I
Yeah.
would ever ignore your question, but I think it's an interesting one that followed up on, how do you stay abreast, or how do you stay on the leading edge of technology? And there are sites out there that will give you kind of a broad overview of what's available. So you can look at, they have help you. This is what they say. They help you select your next HR technology. They probably ask you 3 or 4 questions. How big's your company? Maybe what industry are you in? Do you want HR, payroll? Click off the ones that you want. Give us your email address and we'll send you a list. And they do. They send you a very interesting, worthwhile list to look at that is about 3 or 4 criteria. What's important to you? That's the answer to your question, Scott. Where should you concentrate? It's about what's important to you. And those websites that give you these ideas are a great place to start, but that's not really how you want to make your decision. Is that how you make your decision about buying a car? No. You want to go out and test drive the car. You want more than just the 3 criteria. So those sites, I think, are a good way to get the flavor. And you will get phone calls from using one of those sites. The way that they get paid, quite honestly, is they make a deal with the vendor or a bunch of vendors so that if you meet their criteria, then they give your name to that vendor. And if you do call or reply to the email from the vendor, then that selection site gets paid. So, an interesting way to make a living. But to your point, Scott, how do you know where to start? How do you know what to look at? I think it really depends on what you have. And the first step of anything is to look and to define what you excuse me, what you have. How do you make your business case? We're going to talk about it later, but how you make your business case is, what's it costing you today? Are your people satisfied with it? What kind of functionality do you have today? I mean, things like in talent, talent acquisition. What's your number of requisitions? How many candidates do you get per requisition? God forbid we try and estimate the time to hire or the time through onboarding. Or how about a candidate experience survey? Set your benchmark today so that you know whether or not you've improved, but also, so much more importantly, you know and understand the criteria of success. So, employee development, your processes in general. How long does it take to process a certain type of change, a new hire or an address change, a direct deposit? Who's involved in those? What kind of an approval process do you have? How about employee engagement? Do you do check-ins? Do you do surveys? Do you want to do those? Those are the kinds of things that are going to give you the flavor for where can you make impact. And $16 billion industry didn't get that way because people aren't buying. But what happens quite often is people buy, now they rent, and then they decide this system is no good or it's not the right system for us. Well, it's quite often points back to, did you have well-defined criteria of what was success? And then did you push to the finish line? So I think it's a great question. And I think that the other piece here is around, duplication of effort. Do you have people entering data into 2 systems? Do you really understand whether or not you can replace those systems with one system? A lot of times in the industry today, because it's growing so fast, the coolest technology does a small piece of the overall product, of the overall process. And that's something to consider. Also, if you are a small company, I think that's a great carve out on your part. I think then it does matter. Budget is so much more important to a smaller company. So really defining what you do today and what you really need, what's important. Are you growing? Is the company going to hire 500 more employees in the next 2-3 years? Well, talent might be the way. Or are we kind of retrenching, and is employee development crucial? Can we not afford to lose our best people? So it makes you look at different things. And I think that's the key to understanding the direction you want to go.
Great. Thank you so much. So we're going to get into more of those opportunities and challenges as we go along. We're going to switch and we're going to do a poll here. And, we want to get your input about where you're seeing things these days. So the first poll that's should be up on your screen if you are on, video, based on what HR technology can provide. If you didn't have any resource issues, in other words, you're blue sky, you have the opportunity to put the right technology in, would you make minor adjustments to your tech? Would you upgrade? Would you start over with a new integrated infrastructure? So we're just looking for the poll responses, and we'll give it a little bit more time, and then we'll kind of see what everybody thinks. So yeah, we've got a pretty good part of the group involved. So looks like overwhelmingly start over with a new tech infrastructure. So what are your thoughts on that, Morris? People want to start over. How would you approach that? And what are the pros and cons of that approach?
So it's cool. I think the caveat, or the ace in the hole there, was assuming resources were not an issue.
Right.
We'd all probably like to start in some areas of our life with a clean slate. But I think in this case, and in many cases, that's totally true. You may have had the same system for a long time, or you may just be fed up. The thing with vendors, and again, we don't sell software, so we're not a vendor. We are interested in making technology work for HR, for payroll, for benefits. It's all about servicing that audience. And I think a lot of vendors are not in the business of service. They talk about it a lot, but they wear on you. And the folks, the time that people spend trying to figure out how do you really deal with the vendor, eventually you may wash your hands. We have a client who has been using ADP, and so we've talked to, I'm sorry, ADP, XYZ. I'm making up the name. I don't want to denigrate any individual company, but this particular company said, when we finally talked to one of their sales folks, he said to me, "We pay 1 in 10 people in the world." And I said to him, "Well, that's pretty good, but with the service level you currently have, you're well on your way to paying 1 in 15." So I can certainly understand where people would get fed up and think about moving on. And that's not a bad idea. Just remember, it's going to be not just an expensive financial situation potentially, but it's also a resource drain. So understanding, how many resources, what types of resources do you have to really make an impact here, to work on that implementation? It is a hard job. So, and many times it's a duplicative job, or whatever. It's twice the job that someone else is doing. So HR professionals nowadays probably doing at least 1.5 jobs, 40, 50 hours a week. And now you dump something else on top of them. It's a little bit of the pot could boil over. So you want to be careful of that. But I think a good look starts with where you are today and understanding the impact, and then changing, your entire system, or picking and choosing. You really need to look at that and make the right decision.
Great. So we do have a question. Tony Smith has raised his hand, and Tony, we're going to unmute you. If you could just introduce yourself briefly, your organization, your role, and then feel free to ask your question or make your comment. So can we unmute Tony? Hi, Tony, you're unmuted.
Thanks, and my apologies. I just hit the wrong button.
Ah,
I really don't have a question, so again, my apologies. But
that's
it's
okay.
good to see you both.
All right, very good.
Thank you, Tony.
Are there any other questions for Morris at this point in terms of I see a question. It looks like many. Oh, we do have a question. Okay, so we'll just see. It's from Michael. Nice to hear from you, Michael Heiner. And it says, many human capital management vendors claim that their system is homegrown and fully integrated, but in reality, many of the modules are both were bolt-ons or even third-party partnerships. Can you speak to how you would know for sure?
It's a great question, Michael. So, I mean, on the one hand, you look at that and you say, does it really matter? If they have done a good enough job of fully integrating, then it really doesn't matter that they purchased one, or combined or merged with another company or with another vendor. If they've done a darn good job of fully integrating. The way that you know quite often is when you go from module to module, does the look and feel change? The whole idea is that the look and feel is, consistent across all of their products. Well, a lot of times you see that, gosh, when I go to applicant tracking, it doesn't look like anything like the human resource system. Or I go to time and attendance, and my goodness, this looks like a time and attendance system from the 1980s. Well, it very well may. It may be. So I think that's important. But I also think, here's a spot where you need to kind of look at it and, does it matter? Does it provide the functionality? Is it consistent? Like that payroll company example that I gave before, some technology doesn't change that much over time. Not to say that payroll doesn't change. What changes are the tax amounts or the rules around time and attendance or the rules around overtime. The functionality and the get it right the first time piece of payroll kind of doesn't change over time. So there are some sexy pieces. Hey, payroll can be a sexy thing, but not necessarily the same changes like time and attendance or something like applicant tracking or something like that.
Great. So we do have another question from Deirdre Simons. Deirdre, do you want to just ask your question live? Are you comfortable doing that? So we can unmute you. We'd love to hear from you. And you can maybe just briefly introduce yourself. If we can find you. There you are.
There we go. Okay.
Hi. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Nice to hear from you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Scott. It's me and my dog here. She's seeing someone outside, so sorry for the background noise.
All right, good.
My question is about when you're selecting software. My question kind of says it's like car brands. Mercedes is not a Mercedes. It depends which version you have. So ADP is not equal to ADP, meaning that it depends what version software and how many modules. Is that true, Morris?
It is. It is true, Deirdre, and not just, kind of who grew the software or who made the system, but also you mentioned upgrades or you mentioned bolt-ons. The thing with software as a service today is that you rent the software, right? You don't buy software. It used to be you had Oracle or PeopleSoft or, before that, Genesis Payroll. You had those systems. They were in-house. They were run by your IT department. And this kind of package digitally arrived at the door, and that was your upgrade. And it was a huge project. People put things on hold, they assembled teams, and you upgraded your technology, you tested it. It was a methodical, kind of in your head. It was an IT project.
Project plan, right.
Totally project. Nowadays, software as a service update, upgrade, change, not quite whenever they damn well please, because they do thankfully put it on some sort of schedule, but they upgrade quarterly, 3 times a year, twice a year. And the point is, that's functionality that you probably want, but it's functionality that someone on your team has to keep up with. And then that someone has to have a plan to incorporate that into the program. Now, the vendor has supposedly tested it in their environment so that it will work in your environment. But are you really going to trust that? Or do you want to do at least a little bit of testing? My high recommendation here is that you're going to take a look at it first. But then the secondary piece here is a lot of times, like recently with one of the partner vendors that we've worked with, they changed their whole functionality so that instead of across the top, the menu across the top bar, they put it along the side. Now, it's not such a huge change, but it's a change that you as an organization look better to your clients, your customers, who are your employees and managers, saying to them, hey, there's going to be a change to the look and view of how you use the software. It's still intuitive, maybe it's more intuitive, but we just wanted to let you know, here's what the old one looked like, here's what the new one's going to look like. Let them know. So managing that upgrade process has kind of got thrown into the human resources technology team or whoever's responsible for that, thrown into their kind of list of things that they have to get done. So it's a great 2-point question. Upgrades still happen, bolt-ons still have to be tested, and now it's not necessarily a project including IT resources. It's just us. It's just human resources. So it's something to consider. Great point.
Thank you. Thank you, Deidre.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it. So we're going to move on to how to sell this to senior management and IT and finance and all that good stuff. But before we do that, I just wanted to make a couple comments about, how Morris and Chris from HRComputes and myself from the Rosen Group, decided to partner here, and what we felt were some of the, thoughts that we had. So my first thought was, okay, HR technology is going to be a huge, huge issue going forward. And, I have built over, as Morris has and Chris, over the last 25 years, we've built a lot of contacts within the HR community. What I had also noticed was, and one of the advantages of working with an organization like ours, but it doesn't matter if it's us or anybody else, is to get kind of an independent, agnostic view and input before you run out and start looking at different software systems. Because what's going to happen is if you start, meeting with all these different vendors, which is what a lot of HR leaders do, you're obviously going to get, their perspective on why their product is the best for you. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what a company like HRComputes can do for you is help you with that evaluation and help you look at the different options that are best for you and your organization, not what those vendors want for you. This is all about what works for you. It's kind of like, instead of ready, aim, fire, a lot of people will do the ready, fire, aim, which is not the best way to go about this. And like Mars used the word sexy, everybody's like, if everybody's on the Workday bandwagon, then we got to go with Workday. If everybody's on the Taleo bandwagon, we have to look at Taleo. Well, that's not necessarily true. Those might not be the best systems for you. So what we just encourage you to do, whether it's with an organization like our partnership or any company, is that you do get some outside agnostic help in trying to figure out what you want to do in terms of upgrading or implementing new systems. So I just wanted to put that out. And I think that that's what we bring to the table. We're not going to sell you or pitch you on a specific product or software. We're going to do what's best for your organization, and we're going to give you an outside, inside look. So I just wanted to put that out there. Did you want to add to that, Mars?
I would love to, Scott. I think that's great. And it goes to the point of, nobody gets fired for hiring IBM or maybe a large consulting firm. The thing to sort of look at with some of those firms or any firm that would be talking about helping you is, what's the end game? So in a lot of cases, the end game is to get the money for the implementation. Unfortunately, the selection piece, well, it's unfortunate just from the fact of how expensive implementation can be. But the selection piece is not generally a very large ticket item. It certainly depends how many vendors you're going to look at and how big your organization is, et cetera, et cetera. But the implementation is probably going to be expensive. And if someone who's doing the evaluation leads you down the path to somewhere where they are your implementation partner, you may want to sort of look at it and kind of go, wait a minute, I went to a Volkswagen dealer and I ended up buying a Volkswagen. I'm not surprised. But in this case, you're trying to get that objective kind of third party view on things. And I think it is important to understand who you're dealing with and what's their expertise and, how objective really are they?
Great.
Yeah.
So let's move on to how do you sell this? HR decides we need new technology. We've got antiquated technology. The pieces don't fit together, or we don't have much. And we got to make a case for this. We got to make it to the CEO or the president. We got to make it, probably finance has to be involved at some level. I know you have some thoughts about IT's role in this, these days. And of course, what is HR's role? So talk a little bit about how do you build the business case, and then we're going to have a guest weigh in on it as well. So go ahead, Mars.
Sure, I appreciate that. That what we talked about at the beginning of taking a holistic view and a detailed view of your current HR technology stack is crucial to this phase. Knowing what you pay now at least sets the bar to knowing what you can afford tomorrow. The whole idea here is understand, is my applicant tracking system separate and it's a separate vendor? So what's my contract? How much am I paying? Is my time and attendance some other third party? What about the integrations there? Am I paying more for this? Is it something where my payroll team has to go in, click a button, view an Excel spreadsheet? Sort of keep in mind that the things that you're going to use here to make a business case, when you're trying to speak the language of finance, you want those to be in hard dollars. We all kind of look at HR technology that it is this panacea to cure all the ills and to make us transform us from, processing into strategy. And it will help in those areas, but it's not a cure-all. So, and it takes hard work to figure things out. So that piece of being able to say to someone, you know what, this is what it cost us yesterday. We're going to spend that much, or we're going to save money, but know what your costs are, know what your time frames are. The other piece of it is know your time parameters. So usually what happens in these kinds of projects is the first thing that's decided is the go live date. Because it's payroll, everyone wants to do it on the calendar year, and there's great reasons for it. But if you're going to do that, understand that setting your deadline, setting your go live date before you even know what's involved in the project is a little bit kind of like a gun to the head. And a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of it, you're going to put your people into a very stressful situation. The third thing is know your resources. So here's a great reason why we teamed up. I have to go that way. Why we teamed up with Scott and the team. Because Scott's got that background of bringing people in to help human resources. So in a period of growth, you bring in additional recruiters. In a period of growth, you bring in different senior level HR folks for a contract or a temporary basis or temp to perm or whatever. In this case, you're going to do a project that is going to tax your people. You're going to need your payroll people. You're going to need your HRIS people. So your reporting people, your people who are into data, your compensation, your benefits, you're going to need some of their time. And during certain phases of the project, you're going to need a lot of their time. So it's resource rich, it's resource intense, these kinds of projects. So understanding what resources you're going to need are going to inform you in order to speak to the language of finance and tell them what's the short-term price, what's the long-term price. So I think that's a couple of pieces about it. And I think we're going to get a little input here from a veteran in the field.
Right. So we have Sander Gottlieb here. And if we can unmute Sander, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit, Sander, about who you are and what you do, and then give us your perspective on how to make the business case for HR technology. Welcome.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me. Definitely been in the HR tech space for a while, in everything from recruiting, onboarding, performance, learning, succession planning, recruitment, marketing, and talent sourcing. So I think a lot of the times organizations go and look for the shiny new toy out there and don't necessarily know how their organization buys. And if HR even has a seat at the table with like that CFO when they have to go get that check, because I've seen a lot of times where deals will kind of be ready to sign, but then the CFO says, nope, I'm not going to do that. So I think one of the things that an organization should do or an HR leader should do is understand your buying process, understand what needs to take place for you to actually get pen to paper or Adobe sign or whatever electronic document that you're signing. And I think Morris made some good points earlier about, hard dollars, but I also think there's soft dollars as well, because there's people that can, and there's technology that can create efficiencies, where there's automation, there could be redundant tasks that people are performing over and over again, where our technology could do that. Also look at consolidation. There's technologies out there that you can have silos, but maybe you can consolidate, a few of those to get more utilization, because if your teams aren't utilizing the platform, you're not getting the full ROI. And I also think, Morris made a good comment of like what you're spending today could be a way of maybe you're not getting the ROI out of a certain tool today. Maybe you shift those dollars to a new tool that maybe can consolidate or give you a better impact that's better integrated to the existing systems that you have, or maybe the systems that you're going to in your roadmap. And I would definitely urge people to look at what their future looks like. So don't look at just today, look at what your plan is, a year to 3 years out, and go that route, and make sure you have your business objectives aligned. So not just saying, hey, I want it to do this. So when you go to your operations or your CFO, what's the impact going to be to the business? So great way to look at things is time to fill. So, okay, I can fill these jobs quicker, right? So how is that going to impact my business? Is that going to allow me to put people on the floor, be in production faster, which then will help me bring in or generate more sales quicker for the business? So think in those terms of how HR can impact the business, because traditionally HR is seen as a cost item, not necessarily a revenue generator.
Great. Thank you,
really
Sander. We appreciate your input. Really appreciate it. And we have a couple questions from our group. Delia O'Donnell, your hand was raised. We'd love to have you, introduce yourself, what you do, and ask your question or comment.
Hi, Scott, Global HR business partner. Not too far from where we first met in Morristown, let's say in the 90s.
So let's not go there, right? But okay, whatever.
I'm sitting here for Mars and going, yes, 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 yes. I mean, it's been my world. I've been a global HR business partner, small, large, and then trying to help the state and small to mid-sized businesses in implementing just what you're talking about.
Terrific.
Usually the way a consultant comes in is the roof is burning and you say, can I peek at the foundation? And they go, what do you have to look at that for? How much extra is that or whatever? And then more comments that I'll talk about off screen. Actually, I pushed the button because I couldn't hear Sundar or Sundar. I couldn't hear his name to write it down.
Okay, good. Well,
Sander.
We appreciate you being with us today, and we're happy to continue the dialogue with you.
But Sander, makes really good points, and I think the piece to me that helps you make the business case that he alluded to, or it didn't even allude, he absolutely hit it with the hammer, is the things that you can tell, even with a story or with an example, to a CEO or a CFO. Like, for example, he said, how is your process going to change, and how is that better for your company? So one of them that's kind of basic is, you get a certain number of candidates. And in the applicant tracking world, the whole idea was get more candidates more quickly than you could via a newspaper ad. all dating us right there. But the idea was that, great, now you have all these new candidates. What do you do with them? And generally people do nothing with them. And that's why ATS, applicant tracking systems, are known as the black hole into which you throw your resume. It's not a good look. It's not a good look for your company, for your brand, for your human resources department, because your employees apply for jobs as well. So there's a situation where you can dramatically change things, potentially with what you have or with some of the newer products. So communicating to those employees is very easy, to those candidates or employees is very easy. It's a configuration setting in 90% of the systems that you probably have today in those applicant tracking systems. Setting that up is very easily done. Send the person a thank you for applying. Send the person 3 weeks out, we're still looking at your resume. Send the person 6 weeks out. It's still something important. It's still something that we're interested in. I think that's a piece where we can start to see an impact that people don't even think about today. The other side of it is get people up to speed that much quicker. In Sanders' case, he said, how fast can we get somebody on the floor? Well, getting them through the pipeline, is one thing, but getting them onboarded, getting them, set up with a computer or with a phone or with a car or whatever they need, that's a whole onboarding process that now you're paying the person. And if they're still waiting for that kind of equipment, it's lost productivity time. So that is, on the one hand, numbers that can go into what is this costing me today, number of interviews, number of candidates I got to look through, number of things, time to get live, that you can do. But it's also those sort of softer things that you can point to that say the system is really going to help us better, not necessarily at the lofty side of saying we're going to be more productive. It's truly at a way where you can start to see those things. I think
Great.
employee engagement, one more quick one, Scott, is employee
Sure, no
engagement
problem, Mars.
is a cool one that everybody's into, right? The whole pandemic and the whole piece of what is the cost of, unengaged employees versus people who are really interested and people who are really part of the team and want to learn and want to see. The key is here that employee engagement is something that's hard to measure. I mean, it's quite honestly something that you need to measure and watch over time. And pretty much the only way to tell if people are engaged is ask them. Find out, what do they like? What do they don't like? What do they talk about? What are they happy about? What are they not happy about? And if you're an employee, how honest do you want to be about some of those things? So that's why it's hard to kind of judge. But it has been proven that the more that you communicate and the more times that you ask people, and if they see results of you asking those questions, then they are going to become more engaged. If you take away the barriers to them being more productive, if you increase the diversity, if you value people's opinions and the differences between people, then it's been proven that, people will become more engaged. So those are things that you can talk about measuring within your system. The number of certain categories of people who are in certain levels, the number of people in those categories who have been promoted, the number of people who you have in your talent pipeline. All of those kinds of things can become more hard numbers around how you are going to improve engagement scores rather than just sort of lofty saying, people are going to become more engaged.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone participating. So we have a couple more things we want to try to get to before we close out. So the next, we're going to do a little bit more on implementation process. We do have a question too about, you've made the business case now, and then we're going to do another poll. So one question is, what's the difference between implementation consulting and client side implementation consulting, and why do we need both?
That's a cool question, because a lot of times folks assume that when they're in the negotiation stage with a vendor, that vendor will tell them, here's your cost per employee per month, and here's your implementation charge. You're going to transfer your data out of the old system. You're going to need to configure your new system. Those are the people, I always do this. I say they're hands on the keyboard folks. And the way that those people get paid, whether it's part of the company payroll or the HCM vendor, or whether it's a third party, is they get paid by getting your system implemented as quickly as possible and then moving on to the next job. And what you lose, or what can tend to get lost in translation there, is the end game, is the functionality that you really needed versus the core functionality that they know they have to deliver before they can get out. So for example, if you're implementing a payroll system, the implementer, usually the contract says, we get your payroll up and running for 3 periods, and then, we're gone, we transfer you over to support. A client-side implementation partner is much more, totally is on your side. Now, it is an additional cost. Unfortunately, this is an additional fee. It's not something that is included, unfortunately, in the payroll, in the system implementation side. They may have a project manager, but again, what are they looking for? They're looking for the shortest line from here to go. A client-side implementation person is there to mentor your team, to educate that team around what it means to do vendor management. It's there potentially to have conversations with you around what are job codes and how important are these little pieces of data to the overall system, not just today, but 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line, when you're really counting on that system to change the way you do analytics and change the way you do reporting. So understanding the big picture, but then bringing it down to the weeds to really get that system set up the right way. From the perspective, I've seen implementations done where you start talking to the integration partner, the implementation partner, and they're saying, give us your job codes. Well, you give them your job codes and they just say, okay, and they run with it. Now, are those job codes, do they make sense? Is FLSA correct? Talk a little HR. You're exempt, non-exempt. Do we have those correct in those old job codes? How about EEO category? How about compensation, salary bands, and grades? Are we thinking about those kinds of things? It's those kinds of pieces that are the foundation of the system. As Delia mentioned, if you say you want to look at the foundation, but here it's crucial to look at the foundation, because if the foundation stuff is not set up, then the system isn't going to be there. So client-side partner is another expense, but a crucial part of the team to help you to success.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that, and then we need to move on to a couple other topics and then conclude. I think that's the whole purpose of our partnership is to fight for you, the client, to make sure you're getting the best investment, ROI on your investment. And, whether you choose, again, us or some other company, I think it makes sense to have an independent, agnostic support for you, to go to really to fight for you, to make sure that you're getting this done properly. And HRComputes has been doing this for many, many years and very successfully. So just wanted to put that in there. So we're going to move on.
That's good to get. I'm sorry. The good cop, bad cop was what came to my mind. And I know that there have been many times where I have been the one, or folks on my team who have said, Ms. Vendor, you're not doing A, B, and C. And that allows the client to sort of have that referee position a little bit, that, they don't have to be the bad guy. So that's another area where holding the vendor's feet to the fire is a big part of vendor management. And I think that understanding that and seeing that throughout the implementation is another piece around implementation that can happen. One of the things that we had talked about was communication, letting people know what's coming, and then helping them even more so than that. So telling a manager that, hey, you're going to start entering these transactions and it's going to automatically flow to your manager and they're going to approve or whatever is kind of, out there in the cloud of, and they don't know what it means. How would they know? So showing them, doing the kind of focus groups or orientation to change, those kinds of things are also something that those implementation partners don't do. A client-side implementation, a client-side partner is there to kind of say, let's do the things that are important to you. Let's do the pieces that, and let's communicate to people about how we're going to rock their world. That's what the system's going to do. It's truly going to change their world, and you want them to understand it. That way, they will adopt the technology instead of sabotaging the technology.
Terrific. So we're going to move to our next poll, which is poll number 2. And then we're going to have Morris comment on that. So we can put up the second poll. So based on the potential outcomes from HR technology and the challenges and processes we discussed today, what's your organization's likelihood to make improvements to your HR tech in the next 12 months? So what's happening out there? Extremely likely, somewhat, not very, not likely at all.
This one doesn't have the free. It's no get out of jail card free, right? This one doesn't say resources not an issue. So
well, somebody said that was a trick question.
okay, that's fair.
So all right, we'll pause it there. It looks like more people are thinking it's extremely likely that they are going to make improvements to tech. So what are your thoughts, Morris, on folks that are starting to think, yeah, we're going to probably do something in this space right now?
So a couple things in both sides, both camps there. There are some things that vendors are doing today, like process automation, like analytics, that are probably included in your current product. And asking your vendor what they're doing in certain areas like that, machine learning, those kinds of things, is well worth it. It may already be something you're paying for. So, making changes in your current HR technology might not mean rip and replace. On the other hand, if it's extremely likely that you're going to make a big change, then you really might want to. My first advice is potentially don't believe your sales team. Ask hard questions. A reference check is kind of exactly that, and it's crucial. Having a reference check, but do more than just check the references that they gave you. Reach out to the folks you know in the HR community and find other people who have worked with XYZ or ABC company and ask some hard questions. Some of the things that were mentioned today about the integration of their products, about, yeah, we're thinking of going with these folks for payroll and time and attendance, or for HR and applicant tracking. Ask them about the candidate experience of those tools. It's well worth taking a look at those kinds of things. And then, in today's world, the thing that has happened a lot is that life and work life, or home life and work life, have intertwined so much more. So remember that you are going to impact people's lives here, and you've got to realize the impact on that. And the only way to do that is to understand the project plan. What did they used to say? It was plan the work and then work the plan. But a vendor's going to give you a high-level milestone plan. That plan translates into individual tasks for your people that have to be done at a certain time if you're going to get to January 1st or whatever your maybe unrealistic date is. And so getting the vendor to translate that milestone plan down to a task level plan is something that you are going to have to push for and you're going to want to see. And that's the kind of level of detail that you can ask in a reference check. But again, not to toot our horn, but it is something that a client side team is going to really help you with. Translating that into bite by bite. What is it? You eat an elephant by starting with one bite. Understanding the size of those bites and who's going to do them and what else they have on their plate is crucial to getting this thing done and to be successful, whether you're doing something that is a small project on your current system or a complete rip and replace.
Great. So we're kind of at the end of our presentation and conversation. And Morris, you really did a great job of kind of an overview of a lot of different critical areas here. So we're happy to continue the conversation offline, or we'll put our contact information up, and we will be happy to do a complimentary consultation with you about your HR technology. Just sort of talk it through, see what's working, not working, give you some, as our folks have said, some free consulting to just give you some ideas on what you might be thinking about. No obligation. And want to really just mention that the recording of this will be sent out not only to today's participants, but to folks who weren't able to make it today. So we'll get that out to everybody shortly. And we'll also send you our contact information as well as our offer to provide consulting, free consultation for you. So Morris, again, I want to thank you. I want to thank Sander and the folks that asked questions. And we're really looking forward to continuing the conversation with you today. So Morris, any kind of final thoughts?
HR tech is crucial, right, to the business. HR is more and more important. If it's human, it's a resource. And these days we're tracking everything with technology. So select the right, optimize what you have. And, remember, it's collaboration. So working with IT, working with a CFO, understanding that the business has to integrate and collaborate. It's all crucial. Scott and I can help, or, reach out. Love to have a strategic conversation with you, and really
Great.
appreciate your time. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, and very exciting future for HR technology and just for HR in general. So we have a lot of good things to look forward to. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And we're at 12:59, which we get credit for being a minute ahead of schedule. So we're delighted that you joined us today. Thank you, everyone.